Hello, everyone, and welcome to the midweek program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum. And today we are on the gathering lawn because we are right in front of some really nice palm trees. But here's the thing. It's December the 3rd right now. It's the first week of December, and we've got palm trees here in North Carolina. In fact, there are quite a number of palms that you can grow in North Carolina, cold hardy palms even. So last week we went around the garden with Villani, our research technician, and filmed some of these palms and had him tell us a little bit about them, how we can implement them in our garden, and how we can think about extending the zones of some of our marginal plants. So it should be a wonderful program, and we're going to have a good time watching it today.
I'm inclined to agree.
Awesome. Those of you watching this on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below while I get things started with our pre-recorded segment about cold hardy palms. And I will say the fun thing about doing a program pre-recorded is that we can edit it so we can, we don't have to wait for the train to go by,
Alrighty. So today we're going to talk about, I'm just going to wait for the train. Might as well. Today we're going to talk about cold hardy palms. So you might be thinking, why should I plant palms? If you're tired of going all the way to the beach, it's time to bring the beach to you. I got to trademark that. But really, palms are an awesome texture. They have an awesome architecture. They give you that tropical feel. And to top it all off, they're evergreen. So there's a lot of different palms in the world, but when it comes to the cold hardy ones, they're more few and far between, and I'll tell you why. And that is because the centers of diversity for these species are in humid lowland forests near the equator. So that's northern part of South America, Central America, and Southeast Asia are where you'll see a lot of different palms. And palms are referred to as palm trees, but they're not really trees. There are tree-like and shrub-like forms, as well as apparently climbing and vining forms. Shocking, I know. But they're actually more closely related to grasses. And when we start talking about the phylogeny or the relation of palms to other plants, we can understand why they're so interesting immediately. So why do we immediately recognize a palm? That's because it's a monophyletic group, meaning the common ancestor of palms, it trickles down to just palms. So for a lot of evolutionary history, palms have just been related to palms. So the closest thing that they're related to are grasses and sedges, like nutsedge, which is, inches tall. And so when you get a grass like this, it's really strange. And the plant family is Ericaceae. Not the Ericaceae that blueberries are in, but one that starts with the letter A. So one thing that you can tell they're different from trees is that there's only one growing point on a palm. The one growing point on a palm is the very tip or the top of the plant where all the leaves are shooting out from. It is one apical meristem, and there's no secondary growth. So when we get into our tree-like palm in the garden, I'll show you the difference between the trunk of a palm versus the trunk of a tree. What kind of maintenance do palms need? It's very little. Mostly, they're well-behaved, not too fussy if you choose the right ones, but you will want to prune off the totally brown and dead leaves. And they're actually not leaves, they're called fronds because of the morphology. But you don't want to prune off the green leaves on a palm that you want to be a tree because that will stunt the growth. Palms don't produce a whole lot of foliage, so the plant material that they're using is contributing more to their success. So you don't want to prune off too many leaves of a tree-form palm before it gets big. One last thing I want to note is that you may see people planting palms that are already 8 to 10 feet tall in Florida. I mean, they haul around these big old trees. You can't do that here. They will perish the first winter. They won't make it. You want to plant your palms smaller here and let them establish, and then they'll be ready to take on those winter temperatures as they grow at their own pace here. Okay, so the first plant, and we're starting at the entrance to the Arboretum here. I didn't explain that, but this is why I chose this spot to give the intro, because what better place to start a video than the entrance? This here, lining the entrance of the Arboretum, is Sable minor, and it is spelled M-I-N-O-R, as in the lesser sable. There is a sable major, but it went extinct millions of years ago, so we can only dream of how awesome it was. But we like to joke that it could be called sable minor, or M-I-N-E-R, because one interesting thing about this plant is that the trunk grows below ground, meaning they are tough to dig up once established. They make a great impact. They get 10 feet tall to the tip of the leaf once they're fully grown, and they are tough as nails. I mean, these palms can handle anything. They are pretty salt tolerant. They can soak up a lot of moisture, so they don't mind being in a pretty wet environment. I mean, they just like more sun, but they also take part sun. You can plant them as understory plants under trees, and they'll be fine, again, because they're evergreen. So deciduous trees, their leaves shed. They get some winter sun. Like I said, they're tough as nails. So wherever you put them, they're probably going to be fine. The other thing is that, like with most palms here, you want to plant them in spring to give them the most time to establish. So why wouldn't they establish well if you planted them in fall? It's a riskier gamble because palms grow more actively in warmer temperatures. So it's going to be able to get more roots out when it gets that springtime, that summertime, all that warmth. The roots will actively grow and spread and establish the plant, which gives it a good, strong foundation for winter. Oh, these are also native. Don't want to forget that. We have two native sables, native palms, sable minor, and one we'll talk about later, sable palmetto, native to North Carolina. And these were planted back in 2016. So what you're looking at here is about 9 years of growth. So kind of a slow, patient plant, but it makes a nice impact once established. Great for use around, and this goes for multiple palms, poolside, near hardscapes, foundation plants. These are, like I said, they only get 10 feet tall. So they have white, showy flower clusters in summer, as well as those will develop into black pearls of fruit in the late summer and fall. So very pretty, and they are also a little bit weedy. So our native plants will seed around the garden, and you want to pull those while they're young, because if you let them establish and you really don't like when they are, it's going to be a lot of digging to get them out. Because like I said, that trunk grows down. One thing you might notice on sable species is little white dots. This is pretty much the only pest that sables will get frequently, and that is sable scale. And it comes and goes, but mostly how we deal with it is in early spring when these little pests are in their crawler stage, as in they're moving around on the plant before they settle down for the entire year just to suck the plant juices. In that stage, while they're crawling around, you can apply a horticultural oil and scrub them off, and that is a good way to get rid of them, but it will not be forever. So that was sable minor, and now we're going to get into the garden and look at some more cold hardy palms. Okay, we are now at sable palmetto. So this is a great candidate to talk about a couple of things. First of all, if we look at some of these lower leaves, these fronds here, you'll see that it has yellowed edges, browned edges. It's not the prettiest when you're looking at it close up. But I would not prune these because it's still using the energy in those fronds to grow. And the sable palmetto is a tree-form palm, and it is still relatively short. But there are ways to mitigate the fronds looking like this. How many times are we going to do that? Fronds, which is wind protection. So this is relatively out in the open, which is great for the amount of sun it's getting, but the gathering lawn, which we are at here, gets a lot of wind sweeping through because it is such an open space. And so as the wind picks up in velocity, it tatters the leaves a little bit, and you can see like here how it tears them a little bit. So that's if you want the plant to be maximally pretty. But this plant is pretty awesome to me. First of all, the leaf, I did it again. First of all, the frond shape is very interesting. It takes on kind of a mohawk, a falling mohawk shape. It's like your teenager son going through a phase, but it looks really cool. It has a funky undulation in the middle of the frond, so it just really interesting to look at close up. I had to prune a few of these off on another specimen that's in the monocot garden, and I felt terrible about it because they're so beautiful, but they were in the way of the path, so they had to go. And that's an example of when you would prune something that, even though it's beautiful and the plant is using it, if it's in the path, it's got to go. The other feature of this plant is that trunk. I mean, as the fronds, the old fronds die back, they do still leave their attachment points, which separate into that kind of this V shape here. And I'll point to show what I'm talking about. It splits like this along the trunk, which offers protection to the tree, and it also looks really cool from a distance. So theoretically, this tree will get 65 feet tall, this tree-formed palm. In actuality, what you're looking at here is a 30-year-old specimen. So that shows you the difference between a super warm coastal spot versus a spot here. It's likely slower growing here in the Piedmont region. As well, this is our other native sable. We just did sable minor. Here we're on sable palmetto. And this tree is also historically resistant to cannon fire, and it became the state tree of South Carolina. If you're curious, I'll let you figure that story out on your own. And it's really not a fussy tree at all. Like the sable minor, it can take a whole range of conditions. Once established, it is drought tolerant, wet tolerant, salt tolerant. You plant this and it will do well. It likes full sun once it's growing bigger and bigger. When you first buy it and it's really small, it appreciates a little bit of shade, a little bit of winter protection. Again, just so it's getting maximum protection in that first year. Another note on palms is when they're really small and you're in an area with heavy deer grazing, it may benefit from some deer protection until that growing tip is out of the range of deer chewing. And I know that can be a lot to ask, especially for something as slow growing as this. It will likely make more sense on one of our next plants. The windmill palm would be a little bit more reasonable to expect deer protection on. And finally, this is called the palm cabbage, or one of the edible parts on it is called the palm cabbage because the growing tip is technically edible. So that's just an interesting factoid. Please don't remove that because you will kill the plant. It only grows from one point, but you could theoretically get in there and cook that growing tip and eat it. Not worth it. And you can also see here the berries can be of some interest on the tree as well. And that is sable palmetto. And next we'll move on to a very interesting plant. Welcome to the winter garden. So this is an awesome specimen of Rhapidophyllum hystrix. And that is, the word hystrix is Greek for porcupine. And you might wonder why. It's because if you get in there near the trunk, I have grabbed to show you, and I'll put it maybe up to this paper. It doesn't look like much on camera, but I can tell you that these are hard and firm and they stick straight out at you. So it's something you don't want to be weeding around. I mean, you can see the band name 9 Inch Nails, they should have been called the Rhapidophyllum hystrix, in my opinion, because these are even more dangerous. Luckily, it's not something you need to weed around too much because of the plant's architecture. It will shade out most things from seeding underneath of it. So why does it have needles is a great question. And mostly it's to prevent the juvenile plant from herbivory, from things eating it. But that also raises the question, how does anything get to the fruit? There's tiny fruit that you don't really see close into the center of the trunk. How do things eat it? Well, they don't. This plant has listed poor distribution, and it is in fact an endangered species in the wild. So that's not helping it at all. My only thing that I could think of is, since it's growing in floodplains naturally, that the fruit drops and may be carried away by water to improve its distribution. Otherwise, what you end up is with what you just see here, which is an amalgamation of suckers and possibly seedlings all forming one giant clump. So an interesting feature of this plant is that it predates our records, and that explains why it's so big, because it's at least older than, it predates 1978. So that is almost at least 50 years old, you can assume. And it's got an interesting trunk shape here at the bottom because it propagates itself through suckers. And, you know, as an arboretum, we usually like to remove suckers and distribute them because, of course, we're just that gracious and it's a way for us to spread the plant. But let me tell you, I'm not going to get in there and divide those suckers because I'm not a crazy person. The plant continues to grow outward as suckers develop. So while the tag might say it only gets 8 feet wide at maturity, the plant's suckering habit makes it, over the course of decades, be actually wider than that. So in terms of conditions, again, like most of the palms we've talked about, this is pretty tough. It's originally from the floodplains of South Carolina and more southern states. So it can handle some of that sitting moisture, but it's obviously fine right here where it doesn't have that as well. And you can see we're in quite a bit of shade, but it's doing just fine. It prefers to be in the sun for its growth rate, but given that this is established and there's at least a little bit of an open canopy once the deciduous trees have shed their leaves, it's still getting enough sun to survive. So it's a plant that you can put in a garden early and leave it there forever because it will handle the shade, number one, and number two, I don't want to touch it. So once you do not like this plant anymore, you'll probably be looking at some heavy equipment, something that keeps you at least 2 arms length away from the trunk of this plant. But again, low maintenance. I mean, you just pull out some of the dead fronds once a year and it looks like a big boofy palm. And this is the most hardy palm that we're talking about today. It's hardy to zone 6B, so it can actually even be planted in a pot if you wanted to. It's that hardy. One thing I wanted to add on this palm is that unlike the one we just saw, that sable palmetto, these leaves have no damage at their tips because this area is getting that kind of wind protection that I mentioned previously. So there's lots of tall trees around here. Wind isn't ripping through here, so the fronds remain undamaged and they stay green because of that. And so it's a much nicer overall look. I asked for a teddy bear for Christmas. Instead, I got a Trachycarpus. So I don't know if that means I have really bad handwriting or what, but this is Trachycarpus fortunei. Taylor's hardy is the cultivar, otherwise known as Taylor's. This is the windmill palm. Trachycarpus fortunei, meaning the rough-fruited tree of fortune. And the tree of fortune might be indicative of the fact that in early summer, this will put on a nice yellow to golden flower show. Yeah. So Blake has actually just informed me that fortunei is most likely the plant being named after a botanist, Robert Fortune. So this is your, showstopper. This is what you think of when you think palm, and you can get this in North Carolina. That's awesome. I want this. So what's funny, and I made that teddy bear joke earlier, it's got kind of this hair on it, this fuzz, and that is thought to add some protection to the tree, and it might also create a little bit of an insular environment that provides it a little extra warmth and prevents it from drying out too much. So this is a great hardy tree, and Taylor's hardy is the cultivar that survived, or rather seeds from the tree that survived a -9-degree winter back in 1985. So the story behind this is that Taylor's nursery back in the 1970s purchased 2 Trachycarpus fortunei. They planted them, and then in the winter of 1985, when it went down to -9, one of those died, one of those survived. This is a seedling off the one that survived. So when you're seeing these for sale, labels as Taylor's, those are seeds that have come directly off of the tree or off of a descendant of the tree that survived that winter. And like a lot of the other palms, it likes part sun to sun, and it likes rich, well-drained soil. so it likes that organic matter, but this one doesn't want to be sitting in water, unlike our native sables. The other thing about this is it, like some of the other palms that I talked about, like some wind protection. So if you were to look up and see, you see what I mentioned on the sable palmetto, where those leaves at the end look kind of tattered and they get that yellow and brown tinge. So the way to prevent this is by putting it in a location where there's more trees. However, it's a difficult balance, right? Because it likes to have full sun. So there's very few locations where this plant is going to look absolutely perfect. However, between the features and just the size of this plant, I think it's well worth planting, even with it taking on a little bit of that damage. I love this plant because it's on the corner of this bed here. It makes such an impact as you're coming around down the path. The one thing that I'd like to tell you as a purchaser of it is when you're getting it, or if you purchase it, when you get it and you plant it small, it may exist as a small plant for a few years. I'm going to show you that later. I'm going to show you a different trachycarpus that is smaller so that you can see what it looks like while it's in that small phase. However, once it's well established and it decides that it's happy, it will start putting on several feet of growth a year, and it will quickly get out of your pruning range. Again, it's a palm, so it doesn't need very much. Once every year or so, we will get on a tall ladder and snip off the fronds that have totally died. So that's all that needs to be done. So that is something that you might have somebody else do. But like I said, I believe it to be well worth it. This is quite a statement. A couple of these around your pool and it's instant beach feeling. And as I mentioned before, this plant may benefit from some deer protection while it is still very small, just so that deer don't chew off that apical meristem, thus killing the plant. And when I say apical meristem, that means the topmost growing point. This is also the tree, good thing I didn't forget, I wanted to show you how it's different than a true tree. So true trees will grow out. They will continue to get wider over time. This is stuck like this forever. It can only grow up. This trunk here at this point will never grow wider because there's no layer of cambium. Cambium is a word for the meristematic cells, or the cells that divide. So the cells that are reproducing. Palms don't have that because they're a monocot. This is getting a little into the weeds of this. But because there's no growth layer, growth ring around the tree, if you cut this down, you wouldn't see, like you see in trees, those growth rings that expand outward each year. Instead, the inside of a palm has been likened to that of a reinforced concrete pole. It's just tightly packed bundles of cells that stack themselves as the plant was growing upwards. So it's very different and very interesting, and it's also super stable. I mean, you can shake this tree, but it's solid. It's super solid. I'm always impressed when you look at the base of a tree like this, and it's very skinny at the bottom. It amazes me, and it continues to get wider up at the top as it puts on more and more growth each year up there. Like I said, it can never get thicker at the base, and it looks like a dangerous Jenga tower, but it is in fact very stable. And that is the windmill palm, and what a palm it is. Okay, here we are in our xeric garden at Arboretum capitata seedling. So you will not find this in our records. This is a seedling of a plant that we had in the garden, and we let it grow up here. So that's prime real estate for a plant establishing really well. I mean, if you can grow from seed right in your garden, well, that would be spectacular. But what's super interesting about this plant, and I will grab a frond here for you, is that this is the first one we've seen that has pinnately compound fronds. So everything we've seen up to this point was palmate, meaning the leaf dissections all originated from one point, which you may picture as the palm of your hand, palmate. Now this is pinnate. So the rachis is the central thing going down the center of this frond, and from it, dissections will come off every so often. And so that is what a pinnately compound frond looks like. And so, in the grand scheme of things, you get a totally different texture than what we've seen before. Now, I'm talking about this plant because it's so interesting, but it's a little harder to capture on camera, which is one thing that I considered while choosing plants for this video, because it's sitting in front of yucca. And so what's happening here is that the textures are kind of mishmashing in a sense that this is a fine and spiky texture, and so is this, and it's a little hard to tell what you're looking at. So this plant in this spot isn't standing out nearly as much as it would if there was A, several of them, or B, if it was something that looked totally different than what was around it. So something just to keep in mind for your own garden design. So who is Butea capitata? It is the Brazilian jelly palm. So in summer, this will flower and set fruit, and those fruits have been used to make jellies, jams, and wines. It's a relatively clean plant. Very few of the leaves on it or fronds rather, will die. And so it often looks nice and clean and good and green. Like Dr. Seuss there. But the one thing you do want to watch out for is those fruit. It's impossible to collect all of them, so just be aware of where you're planting it so that when those fruit drop, it's not on to something that you feel is very important. So if you have a very beautiful, pristine area of your yard, you wouldn't want the Butea capitata right there. So this is the least hardy palm that we've talked about so far. A winter down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit will threaten to kill it. So what can we do to mitigate the risk of losing this plant? Well, it can be planted out in the open if you're willing to put some of your own winter protection on it, as in make a little greenhouse around it. Now, I've seen people do that. It's a lot of effort, but some people will go through that effort because they really like having a palm in a specific area, and that is totally up to them. That is fine. However, if you want to spend less of your energy each winter covering this plant, there's a couple spots in your garden that may be better for it. So planting this on a south or west facing side of a building that gets sun in winter, that the brick or the hardscape element will capture some of that heat from the light and radiate it out, keeping this plant slightly warmer. You may also plant it in general right next to a patio that's getting a lot of sun, again, that heat trap from the light, and then it will radiate it back out. Lastly, a little bit of insulation from the plants around it may be beneficial. So not planting it totally out in the open. You still want it to be in an area that gets plenty of sun because this is a sun-loving palm. It likes that sun to grow quickly and look full, but not it being the tallest thing around. I mentioned before that wind protection, so having some trees in the surrounding area, maybe 40 feet away, just creates that little bit of insulation that might make the difference between this plant making it through a harsh winter. Yeah, fantastic foliage. That is Butea capitata. So this is our final and bonus plant, and I've listed it here as a bonus plant because we're not 100% sure on the hardiness of it. This is Trachycarpus princeps ex fortunii. So that is the stone gate palm crossed with the windmill palm that we saw earlier. And I wanted to show you this for two main reasons. One, this is relatively what the windmill palm will look like when it's shorter. So it gives you an idea of what that plant will look like in the years preceding its massive growth. And also, this has the unique feature of having a blue-silver tint. So that's coming from the princeps part of that cross, and it just has a really nice feature. And hopefully, as it grows taller, we'll be able to see it more looking up at the leaf undersides and how those get hit by the light. And so we know that the windmill palm is perfectly hardy, but the princeps is not as hardy. So as we experiment with this hybrid and how it does here, it was planted in 2022. We want to see how it does with a little bit of protection. So this area here is slightly insulated. It isn't totally exposed to the cold. There's some tall trees around it to protect it from the major winds, like I mentioned earlier. And it just a little bit of a heat trap in here will hopefully get it established. And then as it grows taller, it likes the light. So it also has plenty of canopy room up above it, so that if and when it does make it, it will be quite the statement as you walk into the Arboretum. Another thing about this location is that it's near our water feature. Water is one element that traps a little bit of heat throughout the winter, so it is a more temperate environment. And the other factor here is that it's near this building and it's getting a lot of shade throughout the winter. So instead of going through temperature fluctuations, which might lead the plant to expend more energy, the shade in this area keeps it at a relatively constant temperature, which may help extend its hardiness. This plant and other plants that have more borderline hardiness can be placed on the south or western side of a building that's getting sun. So if it's a shady area, it doesn't really matter, but that would extend its hardiness in the winter as well because it traps some heat. So thank you for joining us in our talk about cold hardy palms. I hope that you have gotten some ideas on how you can bring a little bit of that tropical feel to your garden. And I hope you've learned a little bit about why palms look so interesting. And please, there's many more cultivars of palms in this garden. So feel free to come and check us out. We're right off of Barrel Road where we started our video. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, awesome. Well, that was a lot of fun. That was a good trip through the garden, Evan. Thank you for taking us around and showing us all those little cold hardy palms.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. We do want to do some questions, and we did get a couple of questions, but before we get into questions, I noticed during that presentation we spent an awful lot of time thinking about microclimates, thinking about how we can extend the hardiness of certain plants that might be a little bit marginal. So I wanted to bring a book along with us today to do a little book recommendation. This guy here is called Garden and Climate by one Chip Sullivan. I read this last year leading up to our winter symposium, Plants with Purpose. This book is not so much like you think. You read Garden and Climate, you think like, oh, climate change. It's not so much that. It's a study of microclimates fundamentally. It looks at a bunch of garden design techniques from history and how they've been implemented to just make the garden space more comfortable. And it really changes the way you look at the world and the way you look at gardening. One thing in particular, like thinking about where things are in position to the sun. For example, we are sat here facing the south. That way the sun is pointed right at us, heating us up nice and comfortable. Again, you see Evan's got his sleeves rolled up. It's much warmer here with this backdrop here with the sun. We're just soaking in all that radiant energy. It's creating a nice little microclimate here, making us nice and perfectly comfortable on this December day, this cold December day even, honestly. And this book explores a lot of those concepts. It gives real world examples of these ways to manipulate the microclimate from like real gardens throughout the world, but then it also crafts idealized versions of what like an ideal garden might look like if you're really going all in on optimizing these microclimates. So just wanted to share that book recommendation with you because it is a truly valuable resource, particularly with the topic of cold hardy palms.
And I myself am very interested in this, for one, because the way I do things is so not an exact science. I'll blame it on my youth and inexperience. But I mean, I can tell when a plant is like exposed versus like a little bit protected. But even just flipping through this book, I mean, it talks a lot more in detail about the different conditions you could have. And I wouldn't say in a way that's overwhelming, but I also liked all the little pictures in here because it gives you a nice little representation of what you're talking about. So it's not just words on a page, you've got your pictures, and I like the style too. It's got some Greek inspiration, some Greek architecture in here, which I mean,
yeah. I recommended it to Evan and he was like, I got a lot of books I need to read. And I suggested, well, I mean, just like read the first couple chapters, it really gets the old noodle cranking, gets you thinking about different microclimates and stuff. Like I said, it really changes the way you see the garden, see climate and that kind of stuff. So highly recommend. All right, we did have a couple of questions, Evan.
Sure.
Matter of fact, Judy sent me an email earlier. She wants to know what are the best palms to plant in a high oak canopy that gets some brief direct sun, but it's mostly dappled shade, and she is actually in zone 7B in central Virginia. So kind of a two-part. One's for a high oak shade, but then what are some of the most cold hardy palms?
Right. So your two best bets here are going to be Sable Minor, that shorter sable that I mentioned in the beginning, the one that's planted outside the Arboretum entrance. That's a shorter palm, only getting about 10 feet tall and not so wide. That will be hardy in that location, and like I said, tough as nails. You can plant that just about wherever and it'll do just fine. And your other option for that climate is Rhapidophyllum hystrix, which I mentioned. So that's the larger shrub-like one. That is super cold hardy, down to I think -5 degrees Fahrenheit, so you shouldn't have any problems with that. It will be a little bit slow growing there for you. And the bonus here would be a little bit risky in terms of if it's getting enough light, but the windmill palm, it should be hardy enough. Although it looks like I glanced at your next question, and we might talk about that more in detail in a second, but it might be hardy enough and it might be getting enough light there if you have the extra money and you want to take that risk. Because again, I do think if it works out that the windmill palm is kind of the coolest palm that we talked about today. It just,
honestly,
it gives the feel. I mean, the Sable Palm Meadow is cooler but much slower growing.
Sure, but I mean, you can't beat the impact that the needle palm has. Like, you see it in basically full shade, and it's enormous, and it's really filling that space.
That's true as well. That's true.
Which is really, really cool.
Yeah, hard to pick a favorite, really.
Honestly. Alrighty, the next question is from Jared, who's actually up in Pennsylvania. So he says that he got down to -6 last winter, and his Trachycarpus fortunei Taylors died, but his Wagnerianus lived. So his goal is to not have to protect them if he doesn't need to, because once it's 10 feet tall, obviously he's not going to be able to do that. So he wants it to be able to prove itself while it's young. So his question is, do they get more hardy as they gain in size, or is it just as susceptible to cold when it has a few years under it?
Right. So my answer is not going to be exact. I'm not a scientist here, but my feeling about this situation is that as the plant, after the first winter, so after it's established and it gets to that first winter, it's getting hardier all the way up until it's fully established.
Absolutely.
So 1 to 2 years. After that, as the plant gets taller, in my vivid imagination here, it's outgrowing whatever insulation you had protecting it. And so it's getting more sun, yes, but it's more exposed to that winter cold, and more heat is getting sucked away from it when wind blows past. So as it outgrows its insular environment, I would imagine it's actually less hardy. It's getting less of that slightly warmer microclimate.
For sure, exactly. I think that's a fantastic point. And like, it was a scientific, yes, you were going off of your feelings, but you were bridging the gap between science and feelings. I call that philosophy. And
that's what we do here.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, like, you get a much bigger plant, there's more stored carbohydrates. That'll help it through the storm. However, like you said, if it outgrows its little microclimate, the microclimate changes. It's a dynamic thing. As it grows, it changes the things around it. So it could indeed grow to the point where it is no longer being adequately protected. So it's kind of a razor's edge you're balancing on there. So it could be a little difficult. Luckily, we know that Jared loves plants, so and he's up for a bit of a challenge indeed.
Right. And so that's good information too. If your Wagnerius survived that, that's awesome. That tells us that Trachycarpus fortunei and Princeps cross I mentioned, that was Wagnerius.
Yeah.
I'm going to mispronounce that several times.
You're okay. It's a hard word. It's certainly not English.
Wagnerianus.
There you go. Yes.
Is hardy. So that's awesome. That's really, because I really like that. I mean, I think you could tell from, even just in the video looking at it, I was like, oh, that's pretty.
It's a very
It's got
pretty
very full round fronds. It's nice.
Absolutely.
That's
very
That's good
stunning.
news on that end. I'm sorry your Fortunei died.
Yeah, honestly.
Thanks for telling us.
For sure. Okay, so Kathy says, so because I did not hear anything about saw palmetto, she's wondering, is it not cold hardy? She says she planted some 10 years ago in the area near the JCRA, and it looks great, and she wanted to plant more in her new house. And while I was looking that up on the NC State Plant Toolbox, North Carolina Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox, shout out to our wonderful master gardeners, but the saw palmetto appears to be the Serenoa repens, which is indeed a southeastern native. However, it is listed only as hardy to zone 8A. So it would be a bit of a stretch here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It actually might be something we might want to try, honestly, since it is indeed a native palm.
I mean, we're technically 8B now.
Honestly, yeah.
So that's safe. Did you check our JCRA? Do you want to search that real quick?
I will search that real quick.
And then I'll just say my own weakness is that I don't know all these plants. So you have introduced this to me, and you could be perfectly right, and that's awesome. I don't know that we have any in the garden. No, we don't. And then also my criteria for this video, we have some other palms here, is ones that were big enough to make an impact. So I wanted to pick ones that would show up well on camera that I could talk about and had that instant impact, which is why there are only 5 or 6 when we probably have several others I could have talked about if you were willing to look down.
There's always more to learn, for sure.
Oh yeah,
and I don't think it's a weakness to say that you don't know all the plants when there are literally thousands of them here. I think it's a strength that you recognize that you don't know all the plants, and I think it's a strength that you're curious enough to learn more. So
thank you, Blake. Thank
absolutely,
you.
yeah.
So Serenoa repens, okay.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, something to think about. You know, like it's another native palm. We don't have any in the garden. We could try it.
Is it really native?
Yeah, for sure. Southeastern U.S.
Oh yeah, okay.
Depends on your definition of native.
That's
for sure.
Close enough.
But,
that's close enough for me personally.
Honestly, I'm right there with you. Okay, Tamara wants to know, are any of these palms more pollinator friendly?
So, again, not scientific, but my impact is that our 2 native ones, the sable palmetto and the sable minor, will have flowers, since they're native, that more things are friendly with, that more of our native bugs are friendly with. And I think that's my answer for that. It could be wrong.
I mean, I feel like I see the things covered in bees whenever they're blooming, for sure. Like all these palms. Well, there's heaps of little berries up there, just lots and lots. And every single one of those berries was at one point a flower. And you can imagine just the absolute energy and buzzing that was going on there when the pollinators were active. So.
And I see some things on the windmill palm too. So it becomes a question also of, is it just one insect that we see a lot of, or is it a lot of little insects? And
sure.
I don't know.
No kidding. And you know, you plant a plant, sometimes it only helps one pollinator, sometimes it helps a whole suite of pollinators. That's why we're all about diversity here. Like, just keep planting all the plants, help all of the pollinators. Don't just focus in on one and plant only that, because then you're missing everybody else out there. So. Here's a question from Kurt. Kurt says he lives down in Fuquay and he has a potted Chilean wine palm. He says he brings it inside during cold spells, and once it gets larger, he wants to know if it can survive in zone 8A.
Let's see what a Chilean wine palm
honestly
is.
Well, here's what we can do. So what I would do, Kurt, is I would look up this Chilean wine palm and I would figure out its hardiness. If it's close to the hardiness of the zone you're in, then there are the various things that we've said that you can do to maximize the heat retention to help it through any sort of marginal places. If it's not even close, you can try anyway, you know, maybe you have been, once the plant gets too big to take inside and then it becomes too much of a chore to bring in and out, I think then is the time to just pull the trigger and give it a try and see what happens. You may learn that it dies almost immediately. You may learn that you happen to have a selection that just so happens to be more cold hardy than literally any others, like those Taylor Hardy that we saw.
It's true.
It's a possibility. The world of horticulture is infinite and amazing. So these things can certainly happen. Were you able to find any?
One record said it survived down to 7 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
So should definitely survive several winters.
Yeah, for sure.
One cold snap might kill it. I know, because Tim, if I remember correctly, said we have killed Jubaeas here.
Okay.
But that is over the course. But how long did it last? I don't know. Could have made it 12 good years and then Kate the bucket. I don't know.
Sure. Well, yeah, but not everything lasts forever. In fact, nothing lasts forever.
Robert Frost said that, I think.
Oh, did he really? Okay,
nothing
that's
gold
amazing.
can stay or something.
There you go. Wow, for sure. I actually only know that from
Good Will Hunting.
The Outsiders, actually.
Oh, that is The Outsiders. No,
goodness gracious. Throwback to seventh grade literature. Okay, anyway, Jared wants to know if we have any of the Bulgaria strains of the Trachycarpus. He said that they've heard they're even more cold hardy than Taylor's and Waggies. And I believe the one one that is over by the staircase down from the rooftop down in front of the cascade. I believe that one over there is the Bulgaria form.
Okay.
I remember we've certainly had the Bulgarian form available in our rare plant auction for our Southeastern Plant Symposium, and I am fairly certain that we've got at least one of those planted in our garden somewhere. So
Cool.
yeah, good plant, and it works. Okay.
I'm sorry I can't answer these questions.
You're okay. You're okay. Because look, when I graduated NC State with my horticulture degree, I knew 300 plants by their scientific name, common name. I point to that, it's like, oh, you walk around Raleigh, you walk around campus, I know every single one of these plants. I know all the plants everywhere. And then you go to Florida and you don't know any of the plants. Then you get a job here at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum where we have 6,000 plants, and those 300 plants you learned, oh, that was actually not really much of anything at all, really. So
Drop in the bucket.
Yeah, so what you really learn by getting a horticulture degree is you learn how to figure things out. You learn how to research things. You learn how to ask questions. You learn how to read books and learn. And that's what we're trying to help you guys get to that point where you can learn these things for yourself. So nobody has to know everything. You don't have to know everything. I don't have to. Tim doesn't have to know everything. Yeah,
He does it for fun.
he does it for fun. But we all have our own individual knowledge, and as long as we're here willing to share and relay our stories, check things with each other, we know everything as long as we communicate and collaborate. So. Yeah, don't feel bad about that. Okay, Judy wants to know, how old in general do the palms have to be before blooming?
Another great question.
That is another great question. You do see a lot of little sables seeding around the garden here, and it does take them quite a while to even start to put on any sort of biomass. I'd say at least 2 or 3 years before they start even looking anything palm-like.
2 to 3 years, and then some of the small ones will start flowering. But yes, Blake is right. These are monocots, so their first year of growth from seed is it just looks like a leaf has shot up out of the ground, and then maybe 2 leaves. That's it for the first year, and then in the next year it might shoot up a first frond that looks palmish. 3 to 4 dissections on the palm. It's a very slow process, but ones that are happy, 4 years old, they might be small and start fruiting. Others might wait, 9 or 10 years before fruiting.
Yeah, honestly, for sure. And you look at all life, there is variation amongst every single species, and it also is affected by the microclimate that you put it in. So, you could even take 2 cultivars, put them in different places. They might flower and fruit in different numbers of years. So.
The one I would really like to know is the trachycarpus, because that to me has a really big impact, and you kind of wait until. But I think that also goes with when it decides to take off. So once it starts putting on a lot of vertical growth, it's probably going to start flowering.
Yeah, for
shortly
sure.
after.
That makes a lot of sense. Definitely. So it's going to be a while, that's for sure. But they're beautiful plants all the while anyway, and they're cold hardy. They're evergreen. They always look beautiful all of the time.
And then I can tell you this: they will flower basically every year after they start flowering. So it's not like
for sure.
It's not a huge expenditure for them.
And then they'll seed around your garden, and then those will grow, and then they'll have flowers there too. Okay. Great. Well, we will leave it at that. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, that is all the time that we have for today. So thank you so much, Evan, for going around the garden and sharing these palms with us and your knowledge, however fledgling and burgeoning it is. I assure you it's burgeoning. I assure you it's getting bigger and bigger as we go along. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you guys for joining me and trusting me with imparting this knowledge onto you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you guys for joining us. And we will be back next Wednesday on the midweek program. Mark will be he'll be going deeper in the garden on hollies. So that should be absolutely wonderful and a really good time. So we will see you all next time. Y'all take care.